Welcome back to the Fishing Rod Masterclass, and today we're talking about nuts and bolts. We've already talked about the rod, the materials, the powers, the action, and the length, but what about everything else that goes into making a rod? That's your reel seats, your grips, your line guides, and even your paint, and how you can make the right selection for each of those parts for you. Now, we've already talked about the rod blink itself, right? The material, how they're made, finding the right power and action, but there's also the things that literally can make or break your rod, right? And those are your line guides, things that we've broken plenty of times. So today, want to kind of go through what I learned about different materials that for these parts, and what kind of decisions you should be making based on how you need your rod to perform. Line guides are super important when it comes to a fishing rod because that's really what turns a fishing rod blink into an actual rod. It lets us hold the line to the rod, lets us feel our vibrations, lets us use a rod as a rod. And there's kind of three main materials when we're talking about fishing guides. And the three are coated steel, stainless steel, and titanium. The most budget-friendly option here is the coated steel line guides. The coated steel line guides, while budget-friendly, the biggest drawback here is that if they chip, that coating on that steel chips, the exposed steel itself can rust, and that can get even worse and over time just end up breaking your line guide, and we don't want that to happen. And then on the far end of that is titanium. Titanium, you know, we have titanium iPhones, this is all the new metal that we're making everything out of these days. And yes, titanium line guides are very nice, but they are also very expensive and they're also very light. They're light and strong are kind of the two things that we think about when we speak about titanium. However, the one thing to consider with titanium guides is that for whatever reason, if that titanium guide bends once or kind of bends, if you try to bend it back, you really run into the risk of snapping it. Titanium doesn't play very well with bending back and forth to get into the right position. You can almost think of titanium line guides as brittle, right? If it bends once, really in that process trying to bending it back, you'll probably end up breaking it. And that leaves us with stainless steel. Stainless steel is gonna be like our Goldilocks, right? So it's gonna be a little bit more budget friendly than titanium. However, it's gonna be a little bit more expensive, of course, than coated steel. However, unlike coated steel, stainless steel is a lot more resistant to rusting, especially in fresh water, right? But also, unlike titanium, where if it bends, it's gonna bend easier than titanium. It's not as strong. However, if stainless steel line guides bend, you can bend them back without worrying too much about snapping them. So if you're looking for the top of the line materials, you want that space grade titanium, by all means, go for the titanium. However, if you're looking for a rod that's a workhorse that can take a little bit of abuse, that can be fished hard, stainless steel is where you want to be. Now, when we're talking about the materials of a line guide, that's kind of this part here, right? The A shape of this line guide. However, we're also missing the part about the insert, your line guide insert. So what's actually touching your line when it's going through this line guide? For our line guide inserts, we have silicon carbide, ceramic, torzite, alkanite, and there's all these different materials, and things like ceramic will be much more expensive and brittle. And then you kind of have these blends with like the silicon carbide. And yes, all these materials are very nice because with the inserts on our line guides, we want to have something that's smooth, that will let our line run very smoothly across it. But something that I did learn that's very interesting when it comes to the inserts of our guides. Nowadays, it's not more so the material that our inserts are made out of that's more important. It's actually our fishing line has gotten so much better that it's not as important to pick the most expensive insert that you can. With fishing line technology getting so much better these days, we don't run into the same issue, especially with like braid, where our line guides would like get grooves in them over time because the braid would literally be sawing into them. Back then, that's when you really wanted something really hard like ceramic that could take that kind of grinding of the line. However, nowadays it's not as important. So finding a line guide insert that meets your budget here is probably the most important. Also, another small factor when it comes to line guides is the placement of them. So all rod manufacturers that make blanks have a recommended place where all these line guides should go, and it's on the rod builder to put those line guides in the right place, and a lot of people do, so something to keep in mind. However, more importantly is actually the type of line guide can actually affect the action of our rods. So for instance, here we have a single foot line guide. That's a single foot. However, they're double foot line guides where they have a rod coming down this way and then up here. And they're wrapped on both top and bottom of the line guide. Now, something to remember is that because it's two pieces of metal being pushed against the rod, that can actually affect the action of a rod. So for instance, if you have a lot of double foot line guides up your rod, while that rod may say it's one action or one taper, it actually may work a little bit differently in actual use because of those line guides. And then from our line guides, our line goes through those guides and then to our reel that's on our reel seat. When it comes to our reel seat, I kind of mentioned this in our last video about sensitivity, is looking for a reel seat where you can see the same color of your rod blank kind of exposed behind that rod blank itself, right? Here with the witch doctor rods, they put a thing called texalium between the reel seat and then the rod blank and kind of make it one seamless kind of piece. However, you also want to make sure to get the most sensitivity out of your rod, is that when you look at the reel seat, see if there's any exposed parts on that reel seat that when your hand is holding it, you can have direct contact with that rod blank. And an easy way to tell that is the color that I'm seeing here the same color as the rod blank I see above. And another nice touch that I like to see on reel seats is something that Witch Doctor Tackle does and some other rod companies do, is a double locking nut for their reel seats. So of course you have the main one here that locks your reel to your reel seat. However, the second one on top will really lock it down so that your main screw doesn't get undone over time and really keeps your reel on that rod. So you never run into the issue of that reel popping out while you're fighting a big fish. Now let's talk about our grips. There's a lot of different materials out there, and yes, a lot of it does come down to personal preference. However, here are some little notes to keep in mind about each of these materials. So let's kind of start with the classic. Cork. Cork is a great material and we've been using them on fishing rods for so long, from probably even like the first fishing rods, right? They're grippy, they look really nice on fishing rods, they have a nice aesthetic to them, and they're fairly durable. However, with cork, what I learned is that mice actually really like cork. If you have rods stored in like a shed somewhere or somewhere dark where there's mice will actually gnaw away at cork if they have the chance. But that's something that may not apply to everyone. But cork is a great option here. It's a classic for a reason. And if you like that look of cork, it's a great way to go. And of course, as cork is a natural material, over time it may deteriorate. There are products that you can buy to help kind of restore the finish, but also protect your cork over time and kind of seal it. But overall, cork is a great material and is a classic for a reason. And while cork is a classic grip material, there's also a new material called wind grips. So wind grips are really nice. They have this kind of almost rubbery texture and they're super grippy. They have a really great grip, which is really nice. And then also we can make wind grips in different colors. So we can kind of switch up the colors on our grips, kind of add a little bit more flair with our rod. However, the one thing that I did learn about wind grips is their biggest flaw is that bug sprays or like sunblock, if you have them on your hands and you're touching them, wind grips will actually absorb those chemicals and will actually deteriorate faster. And especially because we're in the sun all the time, we put on sunblock, it's all over our hands, we go to fish, we're holding these wind grips, that can actually affect the longevity of wind grips. But they are nice and pretty and can add a lot of flair to our rods. So that's just one thing to keep in mind with the wind grips. And finally, my favorite grip material when it comes to fishing rods is good old EVA. While EVA foam isn't as aesthetic as like cork can be, or even wind grips are, I only ever see like black EVA foam on fishing rods. I've never seen a different color, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I've only seen black. Of the three materials, EVA is going to be your most durable. EVA foam doesn't have the same issues as cork does, like deteriorating over time, or like wind grips was the sunblock being absorbed by it and deteriorating the material. So if you want a material for your rods that is very functional and long lasting, EVA is the way to go. So hopefully now you understand the different materials that we can use for the nuts and bolts on our rods. If you want to go for like the highest grade stuff and super light, titanium line guides, by all means, go ahead. That's your choice. For me personally, I do like a rod that I can kind of not abuse necessarily, but fish pretty hard and not worry about babying too much. So like stainless steel guides and that EVA grip is really good for me. So something that, I don't want a rod that's just flashy to be flashy. I want a rod that's gonna last me a long time and be around for a long time in my fishing journey. Thank you so much for watching this part of the Fishing Rod Masterclass. Thank you so much if you've been here from the beginning, and if you're not, if you just found this video, somewhere above me right now is going to be a link to the first parts of this Fishing Rod Masterclass. And now we've talked about the power, the action and taper, the lengths, the materials of our rods, and now the nuts and bolts. So we've pretty much covered everything that goes onto a fishing rod itself, which means now we get the fun part. We have a few more episodes coming out, and now with all this information that you know about a fishing rod, now we can really look at the real world use cases, hopefully me doing some fishing with some fishing rods and talking about it, but we have a lot of more fun stuff planned. So again, thank you so much for watching the Fishing Rod Masterclass. Please, if you have any questions again about anything I said in this video today, leave them in the comments. Myself and Witch Dr. Tackle are going to be in the comments helping to answer any questions. We love seeing all the questions and having a dialogue going on in there. If this video has been helpful to you, please like and share it. It helps me a lot. And also follow me if this is your first time seeing me. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Hobbyist Fishing. This is my YouTube channel, but I do a lot of stuff on TikTok and Instagram. So you can find me there at hobbyist_fishing. If you want to learn more about fishing rods and if you have any questions, I have Witch Dr. Tackle's website in the description, as well as Kyle's. So you can reach out to them with any questions about fishing rods and they will be more than happy to help. I'm so excited to share the next part of this Fishing Rod Masterclass with y'all. So what are you waiting for? Get out there.